Chapter 6: The Ash of Angelic Pride. Morning in the forest was no more welcoming than the night had been. Mist crawled between the tree trunks like a gray wraith, and the dampness chilled him to the bone. Andrew sat on an uprooted log in front of the tower, attempting something he had once considered automatic. He wanted to master his own body. In front of him on the ground lay 2 wooden swords that Elara had hastily carved from oak branches. "Pick it up," Elara commanded. She was already in motion, her body warmed by morning exercises. "And stop looking at those hands as if they don't belong to you. They aren't made of light anymore. They are your tools. Nothing more, nothing less." Andrew reached for the piece of wood. His fingers were stiff, his knuckles swollen and blue from the frost. When he gripped the sword, its weight surprised him. It wasn't the weight of the wood, it was the weight of his own exhaustion. He attempted a basic stance, the stance of a heavenly guardian. He spread his legs, straightened his back, and tried to unfurl his wings for balance. In that instant, a searing pain shot through him. The black, broken wings only quivered helplessly in the mud, and their weight immediately dragged him backward. Andrew stumbled and fell onto his backside into the wet leaves. Elara didn't even move to help him. "You're doing it again," she said coldly. "Trying to be who you were. But that angel died up there, Andrew. Down here, you're just a man with an overgrown hump who can't even stand up straight." Andrew felt heat rising to his cheeks. It wasn't anger, it was pride refusing to surrender. "I was a commander of legions," he spat through his teeth. "I led wars your kin haven't even dreamed of. And look where you are now." Elara cut him off, her words like a blade. "Your legions are gone. Your power is gone. All you have left is this piece of wood, and you will not to let the void eat you. So stop pitying yourself and get up. This time, without those damned wings. Forget you have them. Fight as if you were armless if you must, but get up." Andrew rose slowly and painfully. This time, he didn't strive for elegance. He braced his feet against the earth, feeling the mud squelch between his toes. Elara had given him old leather boots that were too small. He bowed his head so the wings wouldn't offset his center of gravity, and let them simply hang like a heavy cloak. The realization came suddenly and cruelly. To survive, he truly had to let the angel within him die. He had to accept that he was vulnerable. That he could feel the hunger now twisting his stomach, and the fear of another fall. He grasped the practice sword with both hands. He no longer held it as a ritual weapon, but as a tool for survival. "Good," Elara nodded, and for the first time, her voice didn't hold only contempt. "Now try to hit me. But remember, your wings are not your pride. They are now your greatest weakness. If you don't watch them, an enemy will use them as a handle to break your neck." The following hours were a lesson in humility. Elara was faster, more agile, and didn't shy away from dirty tricks. She kicked mud into his eyes, tripped him, and repeatedly struck him in the back, right between the shoulder blades where the wings were anchored to the flesh. Andrew fell and rose again. Each time he picked himself up from the dust, he felt a little less like a fallen god and a little more like a man. He learned to compensate for the weight of the wings with the movement of his hips. He learned to use their bulk to hide behind them like a shield, instead of trying to fly with them. When the sun, if that gray disk could be called such, climbed to its zenith, Andrew stood by the stream, washing blood and sweat from his face. He looked at his reflection in the water. He saw a bearded face, sunken eyes, and dirt under his fingernails. But he also saw something else, a spark of determination that wasn't granted by heavenly decree, but by his own choice. "Today you took the first step towards staying alive," Elara said, appearing behind him. "But the redemption you spoke of, that doesn't start with a sword. It starts with understanding why the people down there are worth bleeding for." Andrew looked at his black wings. They no longer felt like just a punishment. They were the weight of the world he had chosen to carry. "I understand," he said in a quiet, steady voice. "I am no longer an archangel. I am just Andrew. And I will do what is necessary." At that moment, a piercing, unnatural shriek echoed from the forest. It wasn't an animal. It was the sound of tearing metal and a sobbing soul. The void had sent its first scouts. Chapter 7: Echoes of Lost Souls. The shriek rang out again, closer this time. It wasn't a clean sound. Within it, one could hear the crushing of bone and a strange, mechanical clicking, as if someone were striking stones together. Alara immediately extinguished the rest of the fire pit, and, with one fluid motion, adjusted the quiver on her back. "They're here," she whispered. "Remember what I told you. Don't look them in the eyes. There's nothing left in there of who they used to be." Figures began to emerge from the mist. The first thing Andrew saw were not faces, but a violet smoke crawling around their limbs. They were human, once. Now they were puppets of flesh, their skin the color of bruises, stretched tight over emaciated bodies. Their movements were jerky, unnatural, as if each limb were fighting the other. Most terrifying, however, were their faces. Where eyes should have been, empty, violet craters glowed, from which a black liquid welled. "That was the blacksmith from Oakhaven," Alara breathed, pointing to the largest of them, who still clutched a heavy hammer, now fused to his own palm through the dark tendons of the void. "And the woman behind him, that's Mara. She had the best apothecary in the valley." Andrew felt a wave of icy dread. These were not beings he could defeat with a noble speech or heavenly punishment. They were captives of their own pain. "What did it do to them?" Andrew exhaled, firmly gripping his wooden sword, which felt desperately inadequate in that moment. "It took everything from them," Alara snapped. "Memories, love, even the fear of death. Now they are just hungry apertures in reality. Shoot!" The first arrow from Alara's bow sliced through the air and struck the blacksmith directly in the chest. The man didn't even flinch. He continued forward as if the arrow were merely a bothersome insect. The violet glow in his empty eyes only intensified. "You have to hack them apart or take off their heads," Alara shouted, dropping her bow and drawing her twin blades. "Otherwise, they'll just keep crawling." Andrew stepped into the path of the woman approaching him. Mara, the herbalist. Her lips moved as if she were trying to say something, but only the dry, wheezing sound of the void came out. "Forgive me," Andrew whispered. It was the first time he had asked forgiveness from a mortal he was once meant to protect. Mara lunged at him with incredible speed. This time, Andrew did not retreat like an angel, but like a man. He crouched, letting the weight of his black wings stabilize him in the mud, and swung the wooden sword with all his might. The blow aimed for her knees. The wood groaned, bones cracked, and the woman fell to the ground. But Mara immediately tried to crawl further, her fingers clawing into the earth as the violet smoke propelled her forward. Andrew saw that Alara was fighting the blacksmith. She was fast, but the strength of the void was overwhelming. Every strike of the blacksmith's hammer shattered a piece of the watchtower or the stone beneath his feet. Andrew knew he wouldn't stop the blacksmith with his piece of wood. He looked around and saw the fallen bandits from the night before lying nearby. Among them lay the rusty but steel sword of the bandit leader. It was a risk. He had to run across open ground. Mara caught him by one of his black wings. The pain was blinding. He felt her nails tearing the sensitive tissue beneath the black feathers. Andrew screamed, but he did not back down. He freed himself with a kick and lunged for the sword. He gripped the cold steel hilt. In that moment, something happened. The sword wasn't magical, it wasn't celestial metal, but Andrew's will for redemption momentarily infused it with the remnant of his old essence. The blade didn't begin to glow with light, but it started to vibrate with a pure, silver tone. He turned just in time to see the blacksmith hurl Alara against the tower wall. Andrew roared. It wasn't the voice of an angel. It was the roar of a man who no longer intended to stand idly by and watch the devastation. In a few leaps he was at the blacksmith. The weight of his wings helped his rotation this time. He swung the sword in a powerful arc. The steel sliced through the violet mist and the blacksmith's throat. The giant's body stopped, the violet light in his eyes dissipated into gray ash, and the blacksmith finally collapsed to the ground like the dead man he had long since become. Andrew stood over him, the sword trembling in his hand, silvery blood mixed with the black tar of the void dripping from his black wings. Elara rose with effort, wiped blood from her forehead, and looked at him. "You killed them," she panted. "But it wasn't easy, was it?" "It was horrible," Andrew said, looking at his hands. "I felt their pain. But I also felt that deep down, they were thankful when it ended." "That is your gift and your curse, Celestial," Elara said, sheathing her blades. "To feel what we feel. Now you know what awaits us in Oakhaven. They aren't monsters we are meant to hate. They are our neighbors whom we must release." Andrew looked at the forest. The violet mist was receding, but he knew it was only temporary. He had just understood that his redemption would not consist of heroic deeds, but of the merciful death he would have to bring to those to whom he could no longer return life. Chapter 8: Mirror of the Damned. The Dead Woods was a place where even time seemed to be ailing. Trees stood here stripped of their bark, their white trunks resembling the bones of giants driven into the earth. The mist here was not mere moisture, it was a thick, violet haze that tasted not of water, but of metal and old promises. "Don't look into the mist for too long," Elara warned, wrapping a piece of linen cloth around her mouth. "The void won't just tear you apart. First, it will try to convince you that you're already dead. It will show you your worst memories and dress them up as the truth." Andrew nodded, but he felt a faint ringing starting in his ears. His black feathers bristled. His wings, sensitive to spiritual tremors, picked up vibrations that Elara could not hear. It was like thousands of whispering voices trying to find a crack in his mind. They progressed slowly. Every snap of a branch beneath a boot sounded like a gunshot. Suddenly, the mist around Andrew thickened so much that he lost sight of Elara. "Elara?" he called out, but his voice returned to him mutated, mocking. "Elara! Elara!" echoed from behind one of the white trees. But it wasn't her voice. It was a voice pure, harmonious, and cold. A voice Andrew knew better than his own. A figure stepped out of the haze. He was tall, clad in plate armor that shone so brightly it made Andrew's eyes sting. He had 6 wings, each perfect, white, and motionless as if carved from marble. It was Archangel Michael, Andrew's former mentor and closest brother-in-arms. "Look at yourself, brother," Michael said, and there was no anger in his voice, only deep contempt. "You traded eternity for dirt. You traded light for this black filth hanging from your back." Andrew recoiled, the bandit's sword trembling in his hand. "You aren't real. You're just a shadow in my head." "Reality is what you feel, Andrew." The spectre smiled, taking a step forward. The ground beneath his feet did not rot, instead, it turned to crystal. "Do you feel this cold? This weight in your bones? Is this your redemption? To toil in the mud with a mortal girl who hates you for what you used to be? Do you think these people will forget how many of their cities you once let burn because you were just following orders?" Other figures began to appear around Michael. They were the angels Andrew had once led. They pointed their fingers at him, their eyeless faces mocking him. "Traitor," they whispered. "Murderer. Fallen star." Andrew felt his shoulders slump. The weight of his black wings seemed unbearable in that moment, as if every feather weighed a pound of lead. He wanted to kneel. He wanted to apologize. The void was attacking his greatest weakness, his desire to be pure again, to be one of them once more. "All you have to do is say you were wrong," Michael's voice said, now close to his ear. "Give up this futile hope of saving these worms. Let the void finish its work, and we will take you back. We will cleanse you. You will fly again." Andrew closed his eyes. The image of flight, that feeling of utter freedom in infinite light, was almost irresistible. All he had to do was stop trying. All he had to do was leave Elara and this whole filthy world behind. But in that very moment, he remembered another touch. He remembered how Elara, small and wounded, had propped him up in the mud. He remembered the blacksmith who, in the depths of his pain, found the strength to thank him for death. He remembered the mother and Lyrian. These people weren't perfect. They were weak, flawed, and mortal. But they were real. Michael and his heavenly pride now seemed to him like a beautiful but hollow statue. He spread his black, disfigured wings. This time, he didn't use them for flight, but to lash out violently around him. The heavy, black mass tore through the violet mist. "You are not my brothers!" Andrew roared. "You are just echoes of my fear. And I am no longer afraid of you." With a pained hiss, the apparitions began to crumble. Michael's face distorted into a hideous mask of the void, and then dissipated into grey ash. The mist parted, and Andrew saw Alara standing only a few meters away. Her face was pale, she held a dagger in her hand, and she was staring into the emptiness as if she too were fighting her demons. Andrew approached her and placed a hand on her shoulder. Alara flinched, but when she saw his eyes, tired, human, but clear, she exhaled and leaned against him. "Did you see them too?" he asked softly. "I saw my family," she whispered. "They told me it was my fault they died. That I should have stayed in Oakhaven and burned with them." Andrew squeezed her shoulder firmly. "They lied. The void feeds on what hurts us most. But we are still here. And we move on." Alara looked at him, and for the first time, there was not just cynicism in her eyes, but a glimmer of respect. "Your wings, for a moment, I thought I felt heat radiating from them. Not like a fire, but like a blacksmith's forge." Andrew looked at his black feathers. They were still black, still broken. But at the very tips, where they had touched the truth, a tiny, almost invisible edge of silver had appeared. The path to redemption was not about returning to who he was, but about who he was becoming. Chapter 9, Whispers in the Ash. Oakhaven had once been the jewel of the valley, a city of white stone and blooming gardens. Now, as Andrew and Alara looked down from the ridge of a rocky overhang, it looked like the disgorged entrails of a giant creature. The stone houses were overgrown with violet crystals that pulsed to the rhythm of a slow, sickly heart. The air shimmered with heat despite the cold, and grey ash drifted everywhere, not from fire, but from a decaying reality. "The main gate is guarded by those things," Alara whispered, pointing to the shapeless shadows and city guard armor standing rigidly at the entrance. "But there's an old sewer line running under the eastern wall. It comes out right beneath the temple, where I feel the greatest concentration of rot." Andrew nodded. He folded his black wings as tightly as possible against his back and secured them with an old leather strap so the feathers wouldn't rub together and make a sound. "We must be invisible. If they discover us in the middle of the city, we'll have nowhere to run." They descended into the valley with the caution of wolves. The city was hauntingly silent. No barking of dogs, no crying, not even the wind in the ruins sounded natural. Everyday objects lay everywhere, a doll, a broken jug, shoes, as if people had simply evaporated from existence in a second. They entered the sewer tunnel. The water within was thick and black, with violet oil slicks. Andrew felt the sludge eating away at the skin on his feet, but he didn't utter a sound. His angelic senses, though weakened, screamed with warning. Every meter they drew closer to the center meant more pressure in his skull. "Do you hear that?" Andrew asked when they stopped beneath an iron grate leading to the square. "I hear only the blood in my ears," Alara replied, carefully lifting the hatch. "No. It's singing," Andrew whispered. "But it's backward. It's a prayer to the void." They climbed out into the shadow of a collapsed bakery. Directly in front of them loomed the temple. Dozens of figures in grey robes knelt on its steps. They weren't the twitching mutants they had encountered in the forest. These were calm, their movements synchronized. In the middle of the square floated a massive sphere of pure darkness that sucked the light from its surroundings. A man stood at the head of the ritual. His robes had once been priestly, but now black tendrils emerged from him, connecting him to the sphere of darkness. "That's Father Malachi." Alara recognized him, the dagger trembling in her hand. "He was the kindest man in the valley. Now he's an anchor." "He is not Malachi," Andrew said, feeling the silvery blood begin to course through his veins again in response to the presence of pure evil. "He is just a mask for the Eater. The ritual, they aren't just trying to release the entity. They are building it a body. They want to give it physical form so it can devour not just souls, but the land itself. Suddenly, the sphere of darkness shuddered and sent out a wave of freezing pressure. Both Alara and Andrew had to lean against the wall to keep from falling. One of the black tendrils turned lazily in their direction. It senses us, Andrew breathed. Silence won't help us anymore. We have to break the circle before the sphere collapses in on itself and opens the gate. Alara looked at him, her eyes reflecting both determination and fear. We only have one shot. If Malachi doesn't die, this city becomes the cradle of the end of the world. Andrew drew his sword. He realized that his redemption had just taken a concrete shape. He must destroy what he once swore to protect, sanctity that had curdled into madness. Chapter 10: The Price of Light. The air in Oakhaven Square was so thick that every breath tasted of burnt flesh and bile. The sphere of darkness above the temple pulsed, and with every beat, it sent out waves of phase shifts that warped reality around it. The stones of the square were turning to dust, while the dust turned into black crystals. Now! Alara screamed, lunging from the shadows like a shot arrow. Her daggers danced among the cultists in gray robes. They were not warriors, but their bodies were permeated by the void, so even when she pierced them, they did not fall immediately. Andrew charged directly toward Malachi. His black wings were still bound tight, but the weight of sin they represented now gave him a brutal momentum. Malachi, or what remained of him, raised a hand. Whips of black energy lashed out from his fingers. Andrew dodged them only thanks to instincts as old as the stars, but one of the whips caught him in his left side. His celestial ceramic armor shattered, and Andrew felt a cold that was not of this world. It was as if someone had erased the memory of warmth from his mind. Fallen angel. Malachi hissed in a voice that sounded like the grinding of tectonic plates. Your soul is already but a shadow. Why not surrender it all? The Eater will give you the peace that Empyreum denied you. Andrew felt his human strength failing. A sword of common steel was like a child's toy against an entity of such caliber. He saw Alara beginning to succumb to the numbers. The cultists were surrounding her, and her movements were slowing under the pressure of the darkness. In that moment, Andrew understood. As a man, he would fail. As a fallen angel, he would die. The only way to stop the ritual was to reach deep inside himself, to the very core of his being, and ignite a fire that had been forbidden to him upon his fall. It was the forbidden chant, a power that did not use divine grace, but burned the very essence of the angelic soul as fuel. Andrew, no! Alara cried out, as if sensing what he was about to do. Andrew closed his eyes and mentally returned to his black, disfigured wings. He stopped resisting their weight. Instead, he embraced it. He concentrated all his pain, his guilt for Lyrian, and his love for this broken world into a single point in his heart. Then, he let that point explode. A white light of heaven did not flash through the square. Instead, a blinding, silvery gray flame erupted from Andrew's back. His black wings began to disintegrate in that heat, not into dust, but into pure energy. Every feather that burned tore away a piece of his eternal essence. He felt himself forgetting the faces of his brothers, losing the ability to ever hear the music of the spheres again. With this destructive flame in his hands, he grasped his rusty sword. The steel melted instantly, transforming into a blade of liquid, glowing silver. For those who have no voice! Andrew roared and struck. The silver flame sliced through the black whips of energy, and hit Malachi directly in the chest. The priest arched, black liquid erupting from his mouth and turning to steam upon contact with Andrew's fire. The sphere of darkness above them howled. It was the sound of 1,000 souls tearing, and began to collapse in on itself. Andrew did not relent. He pushed further, even as he felt the flames searing his own skin and his consciousness shredding into pieces. He sacrificed his immortality, his chance to return, his very definition of an angel. A white void followed. When the smoke cleared, the square was silent. The sphere was gone. The cultists lay on the ground like empty ragdolls. Malachi's body was but ash in the ruins of his robes. Andrew lay on his back, staring at the sky. His wings, those massive black wings were no longer there. All that remained were charred, short stumps from which a faint smoke rose. His eyes, once bright, were now dull and human. Elara ran to him and knelt in the dust. "Andrew? Can you hear me?" Andrew tried to smile, but his lips only cracked. "They don't weigh me down anymore," he whispered. "You did it." Elara wept, taking his hand for the first time not as a teacher, but as a friend. "But at what price?" Andrew closed his eyes. He felt incredibly light and incredibly empty. He had just redeemed the city, but he paid for it with the fact that only a tiny spark of who he once was remained within him. He was no longer an angel, nor fallen. He was something new. Something that would have to learn to live with scars on its soul.